When cattle rancher Garrett Steinberg discovers a massive bull trapped in barbed wire on his Montana property line, his desperate attempt to free the suffering animal leads to a veterinary examination that exposes a shocking case of systematic animal torture. What Dr. Vivian Ashworth discovers during her emergency examination isn't accidental entanglement. It's evidence of deliberate cruelty designed to inflict maximum pain. The bull's injuries reveal a pattern of abuse that connects to missing cattle across 3 counties and a criminal network using animal torture to intimidate rural families who refuse to sell their ancestral land to corporate developers. Garrett Steinberg was checking his fence line on a cold March morning when he heard the sound that every rancher dreads, the desperate bellowing of an animal in extreme distress. At 48, Garrett had been working the same 800 acres of Montana ranch land his grandfather had homesteaded in 1924, and he could tell the difference between normal cattle sounds and the cries of an animal fighting for its life. Following the sound across the frozen pasture toward the tree line that separated his property from the neighboring abandoned ranch, Garrett found a sight that made his blood run cold. A massive Angus bull, easily weighing 1,800 pounds, was entangled in a vicious maze of barbed wire that had been deliberately configured to cause maximum suffering. This wasn't an accident. The wire had been wrapped around the bull's legs, neck, and torso in patterns that would tighten with every movement, cutting deeper into the animal's flesh as he struggled to escape. Blood stained the snow around him, and his eyes showed the kind of terror and pain that comes from hours of systematic torture. "Jesus Christ," Garrett whispered, pulling out his cell phone to call Dr. Vivian Ashworth, the only large animal veterinarian serving ranchers in their remote corner of Gallatin County. But first, he had to try to help the animal. Every instinct told him that minutes mattered. The bull was weakening rapidly from blood loss and shock, and the wire was continuing to cut deeper with each labored breath. "Easy, boy," Garrett said softly, approaching the terrified animal with wire cutters from his toolkit. "I'm going to get you out of this." The bull's eyes tracked Garrett's movements, showing intelligence and desperation that broke the rancher's heart. This wasn't just any animal. This was a prize breeding bull worth at least $15,000, someone's valuable livestock that had been deliberately tortured and left to die in the most brutal way imaginable. As Garrett began cutting through the outer layers of wire, he noticed details that made his stomach turn. The barbed wire wasn't the standard agricultural fencing used by ranchers. This was razor wire, the kind used in high-security installations, designed to cause maximum damage to anything that came into contact with it. "Dr. Ashworth? This is Garrett Steinberg out on Elkhorn Road. I need you out here immediately. I've got a bull that's been deliberately tortured with razor wire and he's dying." "Deliberately tortured? Garrett, what exactly are you seeing?" "Someone wrapped this animal in razor wire and left him to bleed to death. This isn't an accident, Doc. This is intentional cruelty that goes beyond anything I've ever seen. I'm 15 minutes out. Don't try to move the animal until I get there. If the wire has cut through major arteries, moving him could cause fatal hemorrhaging." But Garrett couldn't stand listening to the bull's agonized cries for 15 more minutes. Working carefully with his wire cutters, he began freeing the animal from the outer layers of razor wire, talking constantly in the soothing voice he'd learned to use with frightened livestock. "That's it, big fellow. We're going to get you out of this. Someone did this to you, but we're going to make sure they pay for it." As he worked, Garrett noticed something that chilled him even more than the deliberate cruelty. The bull was wearing an ear tag that he recognized, the identification system used by Meridian Cattle Company, the massive corporate operation that had been aggressively buying up ranch land throughout Gallatin County for the past 2 years. Meridian had made increasingly aggressive offers to purchase the Steinberg Ranch, offers that Garrett had repeatedly refused because the land had been in his family for 3 generations. The company's representatives had become increasingly hostile when Garrett made it clear he would never sell his ancestral property to corporate developers. "What are you doing here, boy?" Garrett asked the bull softly. "And who did this to you?" By the time Dr. Ashworth arrived, Garrett had managed to free the bull from most of the outer wire, but the animal was still trapped by razor wire that had cut deep into his chest and legs. The veterinarian took one look at the scene, and her professional composure cracked completely. "Garrett, in 22 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen systematic animal torture like this. This isn't just cruelty. This is professional-level infliction of suffering designed to cause maximum pain without immediately killing the animal." Doc, this bull belongs to Meridian Cattle Company. Same outfit that's been trying to buy my ranch. Dr. Ow. Ashworth examined the bull's injuries more closely, and what she discovered made her hands start shaking with anger. Garrett, these wounds aren't random. Look at the pattern. The wire placement is designed to cause specific types of nerve damage and muscle trauma. Someone with veterinary or medical knowledge planned this torture. You mean someone knew exactly how to hurt him in the worst possible way? I mean someone with professional knowledge of bovine anatomy designed this torture to inflict maximum suffering while keeping the animal alive as long as possible. As Dr. Ashworth began emergency treatment to stabilize the bull, she noticed something that made her stop working completely. Garrett, step back from the animal, right now. What's wrong? Look at these injection sites. This bull has been systematically drugged to keep him conscious and aware during the torture. Someone wanted him to feel every moment of what they were doing to him. The implications hit Garrett like a physical blow. This wasn't just animal cruelty. This was psychological warfare designed to send a message to anyone who opposed Meridian Cattle Company's expansion plans. Doc, are you saying someone tortured this bull as a warning? I'm saying someone with veterinary knowledge, professional equipment, and complete disregard for animal suffering has committed crimes that go far beyond simple cruelty. This is organized, systematic torture designed to terrorize. As they worked to save the bull's life, neither Garrett nor Dr. Ashworth realized they were documenting evidence of a criminal conspiracy that extended across 3 counties and involved the systematic torture of dozens of animals belonging to ranchers who refused to sell their land to corporate developers. The bull that shouldn't have been on Garrett's property was about to expose crimes that would shock rural Montana and reveal how far some corporations would go to acquire land from families who valued tradition over profit. But first, they had to keep him alive long enough to testify in his own way about the people who had turned animal torture into a business strategy. If it were you finding an animal in these conditions, would you have the courage to risk your own safety to save it like Garrett did? If this scene also moved you, leave a comment saying what you would do in Garrett's place. And don't forget, give this video a like so more people can discover this story, and subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters. While Dr. Ashworth worked to stabilize the tortured bull, Garrett called Sheriff Dale Brennan to report what was clearly a case of felony animal cruelty. What he didn't expect was the sheriff's reaction when he mentioned finding Meridian Cattle Company's bull on his property. Garrett, you said this animal belongs to Meridian? Sheriff Brennan's voice carried a tension that immediately put Garrett on alert. That's right. Ear tag shows he's registered to them. But Dale, someone tortured this bull with razor wire. This isn't just criminal, it's sadistic. I'll be out there within the hour. Don't let anyone else near that animal until I arrive, and don't discuss this with anyone outside your immediate family. After hanging up, Garrett looked at Dr. Ashworth, who was administering pain medication and antibiotics while carefully documenting the bull's injuries with photographs. Doc, why would the sheriff tell me not to talk about this? Because he's probably seen this before, Dr. Ashworth replied grimly. Garrett, I've been treating livestock in this county for over 2 decades, and in the past 6 months, I've seen 3 other cases of systematic animal torture, all involving cattle that belong to ranchers who refused to sell their land. 3 other cases? Why haven't I heard about them? Because the families were too terrified to press charges. Someone threatened their children, burned their barns, killed their pets. The torture isn't just about the animals, Garrett. It's about breaking people's spirits until they give up and sell. As Dr. Ashworth continued treating the bull's wounds, she explained a pattern of intimidation that had been terrorizing rural Gallatin County for months. The Peterson family lost 12 head of cattle to mysterious illnesses after refusing to sell to Meridian. The Hendricks found their prize stallion with its tendons cut, paralyzed but still alive. The Martinez family's dairy herd was poisoned with industrial chemicals that caused painful deaths over several days. And nobody's connected this to Meridian? Everyone's connected it to Meridian, but nobody can prove it. The company uses intermediaries, shell companies, and contractors who can't be traced back to corporate headquarters. It's sophisticated psychological warfare designed to look like random acts of cruelty. Sheriff Brennan arrived with Deputy Maria Santos and a crime scene photographer, but Garrett immediately noticed something troubling about the sheriff's demeanor. Instead of outrage at the animal torture, Brennan seemed more concerned about controlling information than investigating the crime. Garrett, I need you to understand that this investigation needs to be handled carefully, Sheriff Brennan said as he examined the still-suffering bull. Meridian Cattle Company has significant legal resources, and making unfounded accusations could result in serious consequences for you and your family. Unfounded accusations? Sheriff, look at this animal. Someone tortured him for hours. What I see is a bull that got tangled in wire, possibly while trying to break through fencing to reach better grazing. These kinds of accidents happen on ranch land. Dr. Ashworth stepped forward with professional authority that brooked no argument. Sheriff Brennan, this was not an accident. The wire placement, the systematic pattern of cuts, the evidence of deliberate drug administration, this represents hours of planned torture by someone with veterinary knowledge. Dr. Ashworth, I respect your professional opinion, but determining criminal intent requires more evidence than injury patterns. Then let me give you more evidence. Dr. Ashworth pulled out her camera, showing photographs of injection sites on the bull's neck. This animal was repeatedly injected with stimulants to keep him conscious during the torture. Someone wanted him to experience maximum pain. Deputy Santos examined the photographs, and her expression showed the horror that Sheriff Brennan seemed determined to suppress. Sheriff, this looks like evidence of aggravated animal cruelty, which is a felony in Montana. Deputy Santos, we'll file the appropriate reports, but I want everyone to understand that speculation about corporate involvement without concrete evidence could expose this department to litigation. Garrett realized that Sheriff Brennan was more interested in protecting Meridian than investigating the crime, which suggested the company's influence extended into local law enforcement. Sheriff, whose side are you on here? I'm on the side of facts and evidence, Garrett. And the facts are that a bull got injured on your property. Dr. Ashworth provided medical treatment, and will investigate the circumstances according to standard procedures. After the sheriff left with promises to look into the matter, Dr. Ashworth stayed behind to monitor the bull's condition and share information that she'd been reluctant to discuss in front of law enforcement. Garrett, there's something else you need to know. I've been documenting these torture cases for months, and I've been in contact with federal agricultural crime investigators who are building a case against systematic livestock terrorism. Federal investigators? The FBI has an agricultural crimes unit that investigates organized criminal activities targeting rural communities. What's been happening in Gallatin County fits a pattern they've seen in other states, where corporate land developers use terror tactics to force property sales. Dr. Ashworth showed Garrett photographs from her files, images of cattle, horses, and sheep that had been subjected to torture similar to what they'd just witnessed. This isn't just about your bull, Garrett. It's about a systematic campaign of terror designed to break the spirit of family ranchers who won't sell their ancestral land to corporate developers. How many families have been targeted? At least 15 that I know of, probably more who were too frightened to seek veterinary care. The psychological impact is devastating. People who've worked the same land for generations suddenly feeling unsafe on their own property. As evening approached and the bull's condition stabilized enough for transport to Dr. Ashworth's clinic, Garrett made a decision that would either expose the criminal conspiracy or make his family the next targets of corporate terrorism. Doc, I want to contact your federal investigators. This bull isn't going to suffer for nothing. His torture is going to be the evidence that brings down whoever's behind this. Garrett, you need to understand what you're getting into. If Meridian is willing to torture animals to intimidate families, they won't hesitate to escalate their tactics when they realize you're working with federal authorities. Then I guess we'd better make sure the federal case is strong enough to put them away before they get the chance. As they loaded the tortured bull into Dr. Ashworth's veterinary trailer, Garrett realized he was crossing a line that would change his life forever. He was no longer just a rancher trying to save an injured animal. He was about to become a federal witness in a case that could expose corporate terrorism and save dozens of other families from the systematic intimidation that was destroying rural Montana. The bull that had been tortured to send a message was about to become the evidence that sent a very different message: that ordinary people with courage and integrity could stand up to corporate criminals and win. But first, they had to survive long enough to make their case. 3 days after the tortured bull was stabilized at Dr. Ashworth's clinic, Garrett received a visit that confirmed his worst fears about how deep the conspiracy against Montana ranchers actually went. Special Agent Catherine Dalton from the FBI's Agricultural Crime Unit arrived at his ranch with documentation that revealed a systematic campaign of terror spanning 5 states and involving dozens of missing or tortured animals. Mr. Steinberg, Dr. Ashworth contacted us about the animal you rescued, Agent Dalton explained as she spread photographs across Garrett's kitchen table. What you discovered fits a pattern we've been investigating for 18 months. The photographs showed cattle, horses, and sheep from ranches across Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Nebraska, and the Dakotas, all subjected to torture similar to what Garrett had witnessed. But more disturbing were the maps showing how each torture incident corresponded with aggressive land acquisition attempts by companies connected to Meridian Cattle Corporation. Agent Dalton, are you telling me this is happening across the entire region? I'm telling you that Meridian and its subsidiary companies have systematically targeted over 200 family ranches using intimidation tactics that include animal torture, arson, contamination of water supplies, and threats against family members, including children. Dr. Ashworth, who had driven over to participate in the meeting, added details that made Garrett's blood run cold. The bull you rescued has been subjected to the most sophisticated torture techniques I've documented. Someone with advanced veterinary knowledge designed his suffering to maximize psychological impact on whoever found him. You mean they wanted me to find him? We believe the bull was placed on your property specifically to terrorize you into selling, Agent Dalton confirmed. Your ranch represents a crucial piece of land that Meridian needs to complete a massive development project worth over $500 million. Agent Dalton showed Garrett aerial photographs of his property and the surrounding area with development plans that revealed Meridian's true intentions for the region. Mr. Steinberg, your ranch sits on the last remaining access route to a valley that Meridian wants to convert into an exclusive hunting preserve for wealthy clients. Without your land, their entire project is worthless. So they tortured that bull to scare me into selling? They tortured that bull to demonstrate what would happen to your livestock if you continued refusing their offers. It's psychological warfare designed to make you feel helpless and isolated. But what Agent Dalton revealed next was even more disturbing than the systematic animal torture. Mr. Steinberg, we have evidence that local law enforcement agencies in 3 counties have been compromised by Meridian's influence. Sheriff Brennan received a $50,000 consulting fee from a shell company connected to Meridian last year. You're telling me the sheriff is working for them? We're telling you that reporting these crimes through local law enforcement has been useless because Meridian has been paying officials to suppress investigations and intimidate witnesses. Dr. Ashworth pulled out a file containing veterinary records that painted a picture of systematic corruption extending throughout the region's agricultural infrastructure. Garrett, I've been documenting these torture cases for federal investigators because local authorities have been actively discouraging ranchers from seeking help. Families have been told their animals' suffering was accidental or natural causes, even when the evidence clearly showed deliberate cruelty. How many animals are we talking about? Over 150 documented cases of systematic torture, poisoning, or suspicious deaths of livestock belonging to families who refused to sell to Meridian, Agent Dalton replied. The economic impact exceeds $3 million in destroyed livestock, but the psychological impact on rural families has been devastating. Agent Dalton showed Garrett photographs of families who had eventually sold their ranches after months of intimidation and animal torture. The Henderson family sold their 4-generation ranch after finding their prize horses with severed tendons. The Morrison family gave up after their cattle were systematically poisoned over a 6-month period. The Patterson family sold after their children received death threats at school. And nobody stopped them? Nobody could stop them because they operated through layers of shell companies, hired contractors, and corrupted local officials. Until now. Dr. Ashworth explained how the bull Garrett had rescued represented the breakthrough federal investigators needed to build a case against the entire criminal network. The torture techniques used on this animal required specialized veterinary knowledge that can be traced to specific individuals. The drugs used for the torture were prescription medications that leave paper trails. Most importantly, we have DNA evidence and injury patterns that can be matched to specific torture instruments. What do you need from me? Agent Dalton's answer would change Garrett's life in ways he couldn't imagine. We need you to go undercover. Meridian will undoubtedly contact you again about selling your ranch, probably with increased pressure now that their warning has been delivered. We want you to engage with them while wearing recording equipment that will capture evidence of their criminal conspiracy. You want me to pretend I'm considering selling while secretly recording them? We want you to help us gather the evidence needed to bring down a criminal organization that's been terrorizing rural families across 5 states. The bull you rescued provided physical evidence, but we need recorded confessions to make federal charges stick. Dr. Ashworth looked at Garrett with the expression of someone who understood the risks he'd be taking. Garrett, if you do this, you'll be putting yourself and your family in real danger. These people have killed livestock to make their point. They won't hesitate to escalate if they discover you're working with federal agents. And if I don't do this, how many more families lose their ancestral land to corporate terrorism? Agent Dalton spread out additional photographs showing the scope of Meridian's operations across the region. Hundreds of thousands of acres of family ranch land converted into corporate hunting preserves, luxury developments, and industrial agriculture operations. Mr. Steinberg, your decision could determine whether family ranching survives in this region or gets completely eliminated by corporate criminals who use animal torture as a business strategy. That evening, as Garrett walked his property and thought about his grandfather's dreams when he'd homesteaded this land in 1924, he made a decision that would either expose the criminals threatening rural Montana or make him the next victim of corporate terrorism. He was going to help federal agents bring down Meridian Cattle Corporation, no matter what it cost him personally. The tortured bull sleeping peacefully in Dr. Ashworth's clinic had given them the evidence they needed to start a war against corporate criminals. Now Garrett had to find the courage to finish it. 2 weeks after agreeing to work undercover for the FBI, Garrett received the phone call Agent Dalton had predicted would come. Marcus Thornfield, Meridian Cattle Corporation's land acquisition specialist, wanted to meet at Garrett's ranch to discuss recent developments that might make selling more attractive. Mr. Steinberg, I understand you've had some livestock issues recently, Thornfield said with the kind of false sympathy that made Garrett's skin crawl. These kinds of problems can be financially devastating for family ranchers, and we'd like to help you avoid further losses. Garrett was wearing recording equipment provided by federal agents, and Agent Dalton was positioned with a surveillance team a half-mile away, close enough to intervene if the meeting turned violent, but far enough to avoid detection. What kind of help are you talking about? Garrett asked, following the script he'd rehearsed with federal investigators. Thornfield arrived at the ranch with 2 associates, men who carried themselves with the professional confidence of people accustomed to getting what they wanted through intimidation. But what Garrett wasn't prepared for was how casually they would discuss the systematic torture of innocent animals. Mr. Steinberg, ranching has become a dangerous business, Thornfield began as they walked toward the pasture where Garrett had found the tortured bull. Accidents happen to livestock, equipment fails unexpectedly, and sometimes animals get injured in ways that suggest outside interference. Are you saying someone's deliberately hurting animals in this area? I'm saying that families who cooperate with corporate development projects tend to experience fewer of these unfortunate incidents. One of Thornfield's associates, introduced only as Craig, was more direct in his threats. Mr. Steinberg, we know you found one of our bulls on your property recently. That bull was being transported to a processing facility when it escaped from our trailer. The injuries it sustained during recapture were regrettable. Garrett knew this was a complete lie. The bull had been deliberately tortured and placed on his property as a warning, but he played along to gather evidence. That bull was in pretty bad shape. Looked like someone had wrapped him in razor wire. Animals can injure themselves in surprising ways when they panic, Craig replied with cold indifference. But the important thing is preventing future incidents that could affect your livestock. Thornfield pulled out a contract offering $1.2 million for Garrett's 800-acre ranch, nearly double their previous offer, but still far below the property's actual market value. This represents a significant increase from our last offer, Mr. Steinberg. We're hoping recent events have helped you understand the benefits of working with us rather than against us. Recent events? The livestock accident, equipment failures on neighboring ranches, the unfortunate incidents with the Peterson family's cattle. Rural life can be unpredictable, but families who sell to Meridian tend to relocate to areas where these problems don't occur. As the conversation continued, Thornfield and his associates revealed details about their systematic campaign of terror that federal agents had been trying to prove for months. We've successfully acquired over 40 ranch properties in this region using our comprehensive approach to land development, Thornfield explained. Some families require more convincing than others, but eventually everyone realizes that cooperation is in their best interest. What kind of convincing? Craig answered with the casual brutality of someone who'd perfected psychological warfare against rural families. Sometimes animals get sick from contaminated feed. Sometimes equipment malfunctions in dangerous ways. Sometimes children have accidents on school buses. The important thing is helping families understand that selling to Meridian eliminates these risks. The recording equipment was capturing every word of their confession to systematic terrorism, but Garrett realized they were also threatening his own family in ways that made his blood run cold. "Are you threatening my children?" "Mr. Steinberg, we're offering you protection from the kind of unfortunate events that have affected other families who initially refused to cooperate." Thornfield showed Garrett photographs that made the scope of their criminal enterprise clear. Pictures of burned barns, poisoned livestock, and families loading moving trucks after being terrorized into abandoning their ancestral lands. "The Martinez family tried to fight us for 18 months. 3 barn fires, contaminated water supplies, and a series of livestock deaths finally convinced them to accept our offer. The Henderson family held out for 2 years until their horses started having accidents that left them paralyzed but alive, a particularly effective psychological technique." "You're admitting to systematic animal torture?" "I'm explaining the reality of modern land development," Craig replied. "Families who understand that reality early in the process avoid the unpleasant experiences that more stubborn property owners encounter." But what Thornfield revealed next exposed the full scope of their criminal conspiracy and the corruption that had allowed it to operate with impunity. "Mr. Steinberg, we have agreements with local law enforcement that ensure our development projects proceed smoothly. Sheriff Brennan understands that rural economic development sometimes requires unconventional approaches to property acquisition." "You're saying you've bought off the sheriff?" "I'm saying that Sheriff Brennan receives consulting fees for his expertise in rural property disputes, and in return he ensures that complaints about livestock accidents or equipment failures are handled appropriately." As the meeting concluded with Thornfield giving Garrett 48 hours to accept their offer, the recording equipment had captured confessions to animal torture, terrorism, corruption of law enforcement, and threats against children, evidence that would result in federal charges carrying sentences of decades in prison. But as Thornfield and his associates drove away, Agent Dalton's voice crackled through Garrett's earpiece with urgent warnings. "Garrett, we got everything we need for federal indictments, but our surveillance detected additional vehicles positioning around your property. They may be planning to escalate immediately if you don't cooperate." "What kind of escalation?" "The kind that makes you the next victim instead of the next witness. We're moving federal agents into position now, but you need to get your family off the ranch tonight." That evening, as Garrett evacuated his wife and children to a federal safe house, he realized that rescuing one tortured bull had led to exposing a criminal conspiracy that threatened every family rancher in the region. The evidence they'd gathered would either bring down corporate terrorists who used animal torture as a business strategy, or make the Steinberg family the next casualties in a war between traditional values and criminal greed. Either way, there was no going back to the quiet life of ranching that had sustained his family for 3 generations. 6 months after Garrett's undercover meeting with Meridian representatives, the largest corporate terrorism trial in Montana history began in federal court in Helena. The evidence gathered from Thornfield's recorded confessions had led to a coordinated FBI operation that resulted in 23 arrests across 5 states and the seizure of over $400 million in assets from Meridian Cattle Corporation and its criminal network. Garrett testified for 3 days, describing how his simple act of rescuing a tortured bull had exposed a conspiracy that had terrorized rural families for years. But the most powerful testimony came from Dr. Ashworth, whose detailed documentation of systematic animal torture provided irrefutable evidence of the defendant's cruelty and criminal intent. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," federal prosecutor Amanda Cross said during her closing argument, "the evidence shows that Meridian Cattle Corporation used animal torture as a weapon of terror against American families who refused to sell their ancestral land. The prosecution presented veterinary evidence showing that over 200 animals had been systematically tortured, photographs of burned barns and contaminated water supplies, and recorded conversations proving that corporate executives had ordered the intimidation campaign that destroyed dozens of family ranching operations. Marcus Thornfield, facing 25 years in federal prison, attempted to claim that the animal torture was conducted by rogue contractors without corporate approval. But the FBI had seized internal communications showing that Meridian executives had specifically requested enhanced persuasion techniques for stubborn property owners. The defendants treated animal torture as a business expense, Prosecutor Cross continued. Internal documents show they budgeted $50,000 annually for livestock management and property acquisition facilitation, euphemisms for systematic cruelty designed to terrorize families into selling their land. Dr. E. Ashworth's testimony was particularly devastating because it demonstrated the scientific precision with which the torture had been planned and executed. The injuries inflicted on these animals required advanced veterinary knowledge, she told the jury. Someone with professional training designed these torture methods to maximize suffering while keeping the animals alive long enough to serve as psychological weapons against their owners. The defense team's attempts to portray the incidents as accidental livestock injuries collapsed when federal agents presented evidence of specialized torture equipment, prescription drugs used to keep animals conscious during abuse, and detailed training manuals for rural persuasion specialists. Sheriff Brennan, who had accepted bribes to suppress investigations, testified as a prosecution witness after agreeing to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. His testimony revealed how Meridian had systematically corrupted local law enforcement across 3 counties. They paid me $75,000 over 2 years to classify torture cases as accidents and discourage families from seeking federal help, Brennan admitted. I told myself it was just about property development, but I knew what they were doing to those animals. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Thornfield received 22 years in federal prison, while other defendants received sentences ranging from 8 to 18 years. Meridian Cattle Corporation was dissolved, with its assets used to compensate victims and fund rural crime prevention programs. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the impact on rural Montana's ranching community. The successful prosecution had broken the culture of fear that had allowed corporate terrorism to flourish, and federal legislation was passed, providing stronger protections for family agricultural operations. The bull that Garrett had rescued, now fully recovered and living peacefully on a sanctuary ranch, had become a symbol of resistance against corporate cruelty. His story was featured in agricultural publications and rural advocacy materials across the country. What we learned, Garrett told reporters after the trial, is that ordinary people can stand up to corporate criminals if they have the courage to document the truth and work with federal authorities who care about justice. Dr. Ashworth established a foundation providing free veterinary care for animals belonging to families targeted by corporate intimidation, funded by the Federal Victim Compensation Program created after the Meridian case. The animals can't speak for themselves, she explained, but their injuries tell stories that can bring down even the most powerful criminals if we're brave enough to listen. 1 year after the trial, Garrett stood in the same pasture where he'd found the tortured bull, watching his cattle graze peacefully under the Montana sky. His decision to risk everything to expose corporate terrorism had not only saved his own ranch, but had protected hundreds of other family operations from similar attacks. The tortured bull that had been intended as a weapon of fear had instead become evidence that brought down a criminal empire and proved that justice was still possible when decent people refused to be intimidated by evil. Man fights to save a bull trapped in barbed wire. The vet suddenly screams, "Stop!"